Greetings, I'm Professor Seth Frey, and we're going to talk for a bit about debugging. So we're looking here at a blank screen. Now already we're kind of intimidated because there are ways that this is not a real programming course. I'm teaching you to be able to read code, to skim code, to run code. I'm more than anything trying to motivate code, making it something exciting so that you'll take course 2, course 3, and keep going and building, or at least feel like you have more of a literacy, more of an understanding what people are talking about when they're talking about it, and more like less like a stranger in the world of code. The one major thing this course is light on is the amount of code you're writing from scratch. And so my course is not alone in that. There's a lot of courses that you come out feeling like you know what you're doing, and then you're provided with this blank screen, and you're just paralyzed, you're just lost. I'm going to write up some code. There's going to be errors in it, and then the major point of this is I'm going to show you, we'll just like walk through writing code from scratch. But separate from that, I'm going to show you when your code doesn't work, when you wrote some stuff and it's not doing what it's supposed to do, and you're just kind of stuck or paralyzed. What do you do then? We're going to walk through that. So what I wanted to do was I want to take a list of scores of sporting events, and I want to filter out the ones that are soccer scores rather than basketball or what's another high-scoring game? Maybe like... Well, yeah, I want to distinguish like soccer and hockey scores from basketball scores. So here's going to be my data, and then we're going to slowly work through kind of what's going on. So here's an example of a soccer score. Okay. Now here's an example of a here's another. That's a reasonable outcome of a game, right? Here's a basketball score. We've got like 90 to this was a bad one. 90 to 6. That's like pretty unbalanced, huh? We've got, really like kind of low scoring basketball, but high scoring by football standards. Okay, what else? I'm just like keeping going. And okay, great. Okay, good. So there's a bunch of scores, and what I want to know is which ones are like soccer scores. Okay, so I'm going to initialize this empty list. Okay, and then what we're going to do, I want to loop one by one through all the scores and find out which ones are soccer scores, which ones are not. So how are we going to do that? Well, there's a couple signatures of a soccer score. It's going to be, it should have a hyphen. Here, let's put an example of like a bad score that's definitely not any kind of sports score. So like 4-4. There's no hyphen, so we're going to count that as not a score. So that's one test. We could look for ones that are essentially strings that are just 3 characters long. If they're 5 characters long, they're from a high-scoring game. But if they're 3 characters long, 1 digit, a hyphen, and another digit, then they're from a low-scoring game. That's another signature. Obviously, they should like start or end with a number. So here, we'll give another example of like a bad score. 2-2. So I would consider that outside of what we're up to. Maybe it's not in the right format. We're just coming up with rules. So 3 criteria. If it's 3 long, if it maybe starts with a number and ends with a number, and if it has a hyphen in it, then it's a legitimate soccer score. So let's see. 4. Okay. First I'll do that test of if the first thing's a number. So we'll do indexing, and then we'll see is the first element in the list of all the numbers is how I'm going to do that. So let's see. Score 1 in okay, great. So if it's in there, then I'll run my second test. I'll run my second test, which is there a hyphen in it? So let's see. Hyphen in score. Okay. And if it passes that, I'm going to run another test. Let's see. What's my other test? I guess I wanted to see. Oh yeah, is it 3 long? That's not right. Okay, that's wrong. That's completely wrong. Length of score equal to 3. Okay. If all those tests pass, then I want to add it. I want scores. Let's see. Scores. Soccer equals scores. Soccer. We're going to add the score that passed all those tests to the end of the list. Okay. And then we'll finally like print out. Okay, great. Then we'll print it out. So this is my code. And what it's doing, line by line, it's taking in a bunch of data. It's going to, it's also initializing like the output list, the list we're kind of filtering. We're going to put everything we filtered out to get in there. We're doing a for loop, and then for every item in the for loop, does it begin with a number? Does it have a hyphen in it? Is it 3 long? If so, add it to this list we defined up here, and then print that list out. Okay, good. So maybe you've noticed that there's mistakes in here. Let's say I didn't know that, because this is, right now you know it, but maybe you didn't catch all my mistakes. Or maybe you're going to make mistakes of your own. So we should pretend we don't see mistakes in here and see what Python tells us and see how we can follow the hints that the code gives us for isolating those errors. Okay, so let's see. So we run this. We get an error. Already this ugly, lots of red. It seems to be referring to the first line, and I'm actually seeing a little caret here telling me like where it found the error. Now, what's it saying? Is it saying that this here apostrophe is the error? No. It's saying that that's where it got when it realized something was wrong. So you want to look around there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be like, oh, well, every item in this list should have like if they're separate items, they should have commas between them. So if I add a comma, that'll fix it. That's one solution. But we have to ask, is that what I intended? Is that what was supposed to happen? Actually, I think I just like mistyped. That shouldn't have been there at all. I think I meant to type 30 to 40, but I typed an extra 3 in there. So I'm deleting it. Now we're going to run again. What do we see? Invalid syntax. So I have another syntax error here. Okay, what's it seeing? Well, it got here by reading everything before it. So it kind of like starts on the left and then reads to the right. So if it found an error here, then the error is probably further back. And lo and behold, I'm seeing that I put 2 apostrophes. So we fix that and put 1 apostrophe. Okay, great. I think we're good. I feel good. Run it again. Again, I get, okay, now we made it to a different line. Invalid syntax on this line here. Okay, what's going on in this line here? Okay, we're in the for loop, and then we're doing our first test. What's going on here? I was doing if statements, right? But it looks like it doesn't like my colon, because it looks like I just forgot to type if. Okay, let's type if. I think that fixes it. So, except, wait a second. I didn't type ifs on any of my if statements. I'm sort of realizing. So what I'm kind of doing is I'm reading the error, invalid syntax. That says I did something kind of basically wrong with the basic elements of the code. Then I look where it pointed me, and I just sort of like remember what I know about Python and try to compare that to what's my intentions and try to compare that to what's in front of me, what I'm seeing. And I know my intentions was an if statement. I know that, and I realize eventually that I don't see the word if. So we'll run this again. I fixed quite a few mistakes already, so hopefully we're making progress. Okay, int object is not subscriptable. This is going to be where your error message is. This is an error message that if you don't know what you're doing, if you're just learning, if you're at the beginning of that learning curve, this can be a pretty paralyzing error message. People tend to know what to do with this. So let's read the error message and kind of see what we can figure out about what's going on here. Okay, let's see. Well, it's in this line. Okay, and it's talking about subscripts. It's saying, basically, it seems like it's saying I'm trying to put subscripts. I'm trying to index subscript index, same thing. That's some jargon. I'm trying to index something that can't be indexed. I'm trying to subscript something that can't be subscripted. What it's actually kind of saying is that this is a number, but I didn't intend for that to be a number. These should all be strings. I don't really know what's going on. I could solve it by looking back at the original definition of this and look for things that aren't strings. But that implies me knowing a lot. Like that's me looking behind the curtain and kind of knowing what my mistakes were. What do you do if you don't know what your mistakes were? If you don't have the definition of the object in error handy, if you're a lot further from the data going in. This is one of the great strategies for debugging. I mean, obviously, like anyone's going to tell you read the error messages, but sometimes the error messages are not informative enough. They're not useful enough. You have to go beyond just reading the error message, just saying what line's being pointed to, where the little arrow points. Here's your great tip is, okay, I'm guessing, I could be wrong, but I'm guessing it has a problem with the variable score. I don't know what that problem with score is. So I'm just going to see what score is before the error message happens. Here, I'm going to type print score. And I need the indenting to be right. Boop, boop, boop. Okay. I'm just going to print score out immediately before the error message occurs. And this way, I'll see what it was trying to do, what was about to happen. Okay, and what I get here is 0. I get the output 0, and then the error message occurs. That means that print score printed out score once, and then once that happened, then the error message occurred. Okay, let's see. What is score? It looks like score... Where's score defined? Score is defined... Well, there's scores, the plural. There's scores soccer. There's scores, the one I'm using up here. Here is, that's supposed to be score, but I put another S on. Okay. So I even defined the for loop wrong. And I don't actually know how score here ever got defined to be 0. That's kind of wild. I don't know how that happened. Oh, that might be from like previous time I wrote this? Yeah, maybe I didn't wipe things. But regardless, there's so many errors that sort of some are popping, making me find others on my way to finding one. We still have this error. We're about to discover that error again. The error we would have gotten if I'd been doing this right is that it would say score is not defined, score is not named. And that's because score was never named. Where I thought I was naming it was here, and I wasn't. We might encounter that error again. We'll see, and I'll prepare you for that error. Okay, now I feel like we kind of got something. We basically got a bunch of printouts before we got an error, and that's kind of informative. And we can actually map what we get to what we see over here. So this print is before any if statement. So what should happen is that every element of scores is going to get printed out, and that's kind of what we see. The first thing to get printed out is 2-0. And here, 2-0. Great. I'm guessing the next thing that should get printed out is 3-3, and we see it, 3-3. Next thing that should get printed out is 90-62, and there it is. Then 30-40, then 0-0, then 4-3. But that's weird. After 0-0, instead of getting 4-3, we get 1. Now that's weird. Why do we get 1? Well, looking here, it looks like I forgot to put my my apostrophes, my quotes. So what was going on is that instead of reading this as 0-0, it was reading, or 4-3, it was reading this as arithmetic. 4 minus 3. I didn't put it in quotes, so it wasn't treating those numbers as strings. It was treating those numbers as numbers. And when I take one number, hyphen another number, I do subtraction, and 3 minus 4 is 1. So I was getting the number 1 instead of the string for 3. And the number 1 is an int object. And we've learned the whole point of indexing is you can index strings, you can index lists. You can't index numbers. And that's what it's saying here. It's using different words. It's calling, instead of number, it's saying int object. Instead of index, it's saying subscript. So we have to get past some jargon, which we can do by Googling. That's actually super common, is just to Google your error messages. Int object is not subscriptable. This actually tends to start working once you know what you're doing. It can be not the best strategy for the very, 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 very beginner coder. But let's see how far we get. That looks like a really big, okay, so what's going on? I'm on a website called Stack Overflow. The way it is there's the first block where someone asks a question. And then there's a bunch of other blocks below answers where a lot of people answer the question. And what you tend to want to do is, sometimes I just skip the question. I skip straight to the answer, specifically the first answer that has a green check mark. And it's talking about there's like a lot of code. It looks like a really specific question, so I'm going to just skip this one. But fortunately, there's a lot of people who've encountered this error in a lot of environments. So I'm going to try something else. Okay, let's see. Simple piece of code. Get someone's name and age and let him or her know when they turn 21. Okay, this seems like kind of elementary code, though a little complicated there. That's kind of ugly. I'm going to say this isn't, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to also add the word beginner. I want you can do this. I want when a beginner encounters these types of errors. So let's see. Okay, this looks like a really short example that's the same kind of structure as what we're going. We're using a for loop. We have very few lines of code. So let's see. Okay, if I were to read this, what I would get eventually is that this person here is subscripting something. We're going to guess that temp ends up being a number. And look, temp should be a number because this means this is all arithmetic. So they defined a number and then they tried subscripting it, and you can't do that. So they're finding the same thing we kind of found, which is here, that we defined a number. This wasn't in quotes before. It was just a number, and we tried to subscript it. Googling your error messages, it's worth doing. What I recommend when you do it is don't spend too much time. Look for the first couple answers, skim them quickly. If you see what you're looking for, good. If you don't go down that rabbit hole. Go to your code and play with your code. A lot of print statements. So, we just fixed an error. We identified that there was a problem in this definition. I hadn't put quotes. That was leading down the line to a very different kind of error message. The other errors we got on this line were about this line. That particular error didn't pop up until a couple lines later, until down here, and it was kind of arcane. It was talking about something like down the line. We weren't dealing with the immediate consequences of this error because it's totally fine to define a list that has both strings and numbers. So there was no syntax error. It was more it was like a data quality error. That this code was making an assumption. It was assuming everything it would encounter would be a string, and that assumption was being violated. And because we didn't check, we had no way of checking the assumption up here, so we sort of find out it got violated lines later. This is a lot of debugging. Some of your errors just pop out right away, and Python can find them right away and tell you exactly where they were. Others you don't discover. Except you only discover kind of down the line once a bunch of other stuff has happened. And this is where a lot of detective work comes in. Print helped us so much right here. Print brought us back to the data. I printed score, and I got the thing that was problematic immediately before it became problematic. That's how we were able to isolate that error. And that's a really great strategy in general. Okay, so let's run again and see what goes next. Maybe we're good. Maybe we'll keep getting errors. Name Skocker is not defined. Oh, Skocker. Well, obviously that's a typo. Where's it finding this? Print scores Skocker. Okay, so if I fix Skocker, then we're good. That was pretty straightforward. It actually just said it's not defined. And and when I read it, I saw that I didn't type soccer. Okay. Oh, well, actually, that didn't fix anything. Name soccer is not defined. So I fixed my typo, I got rid of the C, but it still doesn't like this line. What's going on? Well, this is my variable, scores soccer, but it's not saying scores soccer. It's just saying soccer. Well, it's treating soccer like its own thing for some reason. And so when I compare, maybe you're seeing it now. I used an underscore here. I used a hyphen or here. And so what's going on here is Python, if you watch, I'm going to put spaces on each end of this hyphen, and I'm going to get the exact same error. Name soccer is not defined. So what's going on is it knows scores is a variable. It's never seen soccer before, but it assumes because that I mean for it to be a variable. And what it thinks I'm asking for right now is to subtract this variable, which isn't defined, from this variable, which is a list. It's not even a number. But it saw the minus sign and really ran with that. So I shouldn't have typed the minus sign. I should have typed the underscore. Now we have scores soccer, which is exactly the same. Letter for letter is this. That's correct. So we found another error. Let's run this code again. See how we do. Okay. This is a lot of output. We're basically printing out every element of that list. That was all for debugging. I made it to the bottom finally, and that feels good. So I'm going to comment this out. I'm going to make it go away for now. We at least got the code running, but if we look at the output, it's still not working. Okay, scores sub soccer is supposed to, here's the elements that the final output, this here, is supposed to have. It's supposed to have all the elements that start with a number, that have a hyphen, and that are 3 long. So it's supposed to have 2-0, it's supposed to have 3-3. It'll probably skip that because that's 5 long, not 3. It'll skip that. It should have this. It should have this. It should skip that. It should skip that. Okay. What do we actually get? What we actually get is it was defined empty and it's still empty for some reason. So what's going on? What's going on? We're going to go back to print. We're going to go back to print and we're going to see sort of how we do. I could put my print here, except instead of printing score, I want to print scores soccer. Scores soccer. Okay, I'll print that out and this will just give us some hints of what's going on. Like, okay, it looks like it never grows. It's never growing. That's a hint. That means we know to look at the line where it's supposed to grow. It's supposed to grow. This is the line where it grows. We're appending right here. So something's supposed to be happening that's not happening. So I just want more hints. I kind of want more. The error's not popping out immediately to me of what's going on. So I'm going to print. I'm going to move my print score soccer up here. And then just kind of run it again, and I should get, okay, so what it's saying is it only got past these 3 if statements once. So that's already a problem. But even though it got there once, it still didn't append that one thing. What's the one thing it should have appended? What's the one thing that did make it through all 3 of these tests? Let's find out. In addition to printing score soccer, we're going to print. I'm just going to print score as well. We're going to print both. Now so we're just like printing, and I know that I'm going to, for every item that makes it down here, I'm going to get 2 outputs. One should be this list. One should be a number, hopefully. So we run it, and oh yeah, I don't get a thing. Oh right, because this is what happens when you use lots of print statements. This last line is being printed. So we never made it in here at all. We never made it to this inner for loop. So let's find out where we do make it. That's interesting, right? That means these tests were written wrong. These tests aren't doing what I wrote them to do. They're doing something else. Okay. So now I'm going to go back one level of indenting and see if I ever make it to this if statement. And it looks like I don't make it to this if statement. I'm still printing out this last line. I'm not printing out my two print statements here. So I'm going to copy them again. I'm going to print them here. And see, do I make it? Okay. Okay, finally we're getting something. We're getting 3 outputs instead of 1. So what's this last line? It must be this. These 2 lines must be this. So we should have made it past this first if statement more times than we did. I don't know what's going on. Let's look at it. If score sub 1 is in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so we're sort of saying if this element is a number, is a digit, or the string version of a digit. So let's look at this line. We got a hint that something's wrong with this line. Because above this line, everything in the list is being passed to the if statement. Only one thing is making it past the if statement, even though lots of things should make it past the if statement. So I look, and I remember 0 indexing. That, oh wait, I'm putting the first element. I want to check if the first element's a number, but I'm actually checking the second element. I'm checking the thing at address 1, which is always the second element. It's the thing that address 0, boom, that's always the first element. And that explains why 44 is the only thing that survived. All these others, here, well, that's got a number in the second element. This has a number in the second element, but neither of those passed. That's weird, actually. I don't know what's going on there. That would have been a hyphen, not a number. Hyphen, not a number. Hyphen, not a number. Hyphen, not a number. That was a number. And this would have been W, which is not a number. So if I run this again, we're going to make a little more progress. Except now we get an error. Oh wait, soccer is not defined. Okay, so what just happened is we solved one problem, but then an older problem just popped up again. A problem we hadn't caught yet just got discovered. We're getting pointed to this line. See the error, 11? This is the line we're getting pointed to. And we saw this error before, soccer is not defined. What was going on there? It was the minus sign instead of the underscore. So I found the underscore, I fixed that. We're finding error by error. This, again, was a lower level syntax error. Like I typed wrong rather than I was reasoning wrong. That's our jargon for a syntax error rather than like a logic error. So I fixed that. Now I'm going to run again. We're finding error after error. Okay, a lot's going on. Let's look at this. So each of these is like there's 2 print statements next to each other. So the way I should read this is like this is a little too much. This is a lot of stuff. But I do remember that it's like printing out pairs of stuff. It'll print out the item and then the list I'm building. Then the item, then the list I'm building. Item, list I'm building. That's kind of, I'm going to pull this back actually. I'm just going to comment these out. You can see as I debug that I end up with print statements commented out everywhere. That's like the signature of some debugged code. I'm just going to like go back to the basics now, get rid of those print statements and kind of see what I get. Okay, I'm getting 1 line of output and that's my final line of output. Now, how happy am I with this line of output? It's progress, honestly. I've got 3 soccer scores. Boom, boom, and boom. But for some reason, I didn't get this one. And I didn't get this one. This one got skipped. So we know kind of what we want, so we can go back and sort of ask what's going on. Let's go back to printing out score. I want to see what's going on with 0, 0 here. So what I'm going to do is I know this is a lot of soccer games end 0, 0, so it should end up in the inner sanctum up here, but it's not. For some reason, it's not. Okay, and I know it ends up here. So what I should expect is that every element that makes it all the way down is going to get printed twice, and the ones that don't make it all the way down are going to get printed once. So let's run this, and what we're going to find is that 0, 0 is getting printed once. So this one makes it, that's why it got printed twice. This makes it, it got printed twice. This didn't make it, but it shouldn't have, so that's good. This didn't make it, but shouldn't have. This only gets printed once, so this didn't make it into the inner sanctum like we wanted. Printed twice. This is weird. I don't even know what that means. And then this gets printed once. This gets printed once. There's a couple problems here. Let's deal with them one by one. I'm going to, yeah, because that's weird. That's 6-531 got turned into one string. I don't know what's going on there. If we look, let's look at it. Let's see. I'm just looking at the syntax. What's going on around here? It looks like I forgot to type a comma. Okay, fine. Let's run. So that might explain why 6.5 didn't show up. I'm going to run this code again and see. Let's look at what the last line is. Okay, this is cool. So the line's getting longer and longer. More of the things that we want to be in there are getting in there. But still, for some reason, 0, 0 is not getting in there. I want to understand that better. So I'm going to put another print statement. I'm going to uncomment this one. Now, this is going to give us more hints. So the things that make it all the way down to here should get printed 3 times. The things that survive this if statement should get printed twice. So now we're going to find out, did 0, 0, if 0, 0 survived this if statement, if it gets printed twice, then I know that the problem is either here or here. If 0-0 only gets printed once, then I know that the problem's here because it made it here. 0, 0 made it here, but it never made it here. This is the kind of logic we use when we're debugging to isolate our errors. So once again, 0, 0 isn't going to get printed 3 times. We know because it doesn't make it down here. It's either going to get printed once or twice. And depending how many times it gets printed, that's going to give us hints about where the error is. So I'm going to run this, and let's look for 0, 0. So 3 times, 3 times, these all make it down. That's great. 0, 0 looks like it's only getting printed once. That means that happened here as soon as it got assigned the score. Here's the second print statement where 0, 0 never made it. That means 0, 0 should have made it through this if statement and didn't. What's this if statement do again? It's supposed to check if the first element of score is a number. And it checks if it's a number by, we create a string of all the numbers, of all the single digit numbers, and we see is this number in that string. But when I look at my string of single digit numbers, I forgot one of them. I forgot 0. So 0 is the first element here, and it was never getting found in this list because I forgot to include it. So that's not a syntax error. My code was doing exactly what I told it to. My problem was what I was telling it to do is different than what I wanted. There was that disconnect. Maybe because I'm inexperienced, maybe because I hadn't thought it through, maybe I'm figuring things out as I go. Whatever reason, my logic error is preventing the code from doing what I want it to do. So we're going to run this code now. We're going to run this code, but let me get rid of the print statements again. Okay, run this code again. And what do I have here? I've got 6 elements. How many do I want? I want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hey, that feels pretty good. I think we've pretty much debugged this code. There are no errors in this code. There's no logical errors in this code. This code gives precisely the output it's supposed to give. That's encouraging. There are still some problems with this code. This is really good. This code's great for this input, but it's not good for all possible inputs. There still exist inputs that satisfy all the conditions, but that are wrong. Additionally, I have some code in here I don't need or I'm not supposed to have. Additionally, I've got really ugly code. So, first, let's look at this. Is this here a valid soccer score? Or is this a valid soccer score? Neither of those are valid soccer scores, but they're both going to pass. They're both going to get added. That's because I'm not checking is the last thing also a number. So I'm going to have to add that. I'm going to do it this way. I'm just going to indent everything. And then I want to check the last element. So if I add this if statement, that we added another test, and now we know that there's 3 elements. The first one must be a number, the second one must be a number, and the third one must be a hyphen, because neither the first nor the last are a hyphen. Okay, so we fixed that logic error. We're getting now just 6 items just like we want. There's still some ugliness. There's all these print statements. I'm going to get rid of them. Okay, I run that and we're good. There's another problem, which is this is sort of an ugliness, that my indents should always be the same number of spaces. So I've got 2 spaces here, but I've got 4 spaces there. That should just be 2. This often matters a lot. So I didn't get an error for this, but it's very likely that you would have gotten an error for this at some point. And one thing that can go wrong while I'm checking, 1, 2. So those are all indented twice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's indented way too many times, so I'm going to send it back. I just get 2. Now, if you make these types of errors, sometimes it's easy to lose track, so I'm going kind of carefully. When I run this, I should get the same answer as before, but now the code's getting prettier and kind of more sane. There is one more thing I'm doing that is weird. When I look at it, I've still got scores Skocker here. That's kind of strange. It's not causing an error, but it's definitely a misspelling, so I'm going to fix that. So okay, good. It was a benign error, but it wasn't hurting me. But I should still not have random errors in my code. So I fixed that. Now I run it, and unfortunately, I should still get the same. Oh my goodness, what happened? So now we have this hidden error that popped up. We almost didn't have to fix anything. In fact, if I go back to putting that there, everything will be fine. I'll be happy. Maybe I should just leave that error in. But no, let's solve this. Let's really understand what's going on. None type object has no attribute append. Okay, let's figure this out. Let's get through this. It's talking about append. There's only one append in this code here, and it's telling me what line has the error. So it's absolutely talking about the thing that we're trying to do append on. No attribute append. So dot means append is in the function append is in this list. So what it's telling us is that score soccer is none. Score soccer shouldn't be none. Score soccer should either be the empty list or a slightly longer list. But suddenly it became none, and I don't know why it's none. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back to good old trusty print. Print scores soccer. And you see I'm putting the print immediately above that line. And we're going to see if that gives us any hints. I can also, let's see if that gives us any hints. That didn't give us any hints. That okay, it starts off, score soccer starts off empty list like it should, but then very quickly it becomes none. And I don't know why. It looks like on the second loop it became none. So how did it become none? It's supposed to get longer, and instead it's disappearing or getting erased or something. So now we're going to add another print statement. I know that the problem's here. So I'm going to see what score soccer is immediately before and immediately after. And this is going to keep giving us hints. So, okay. Boop, 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 boop. Okay, so I get print. The very first print is giving me empty list. The very second print is giving me none. Weird. And then the third print is giving me none again because score soccer hasn't changed. And then when none gets sent here, this is what happens. This is the error we get. In fact, if I get rid of everything, I'll get the exact same error. So what's going on? That's the exact same error as if I have this here. Exact same error. So literally, score soccer is being assigned to none for some reason. Here's the reason. The way I taught you to use append is that you don't need an equal sign. Sometimes when we define a variable, we do an equal sign. Sometimes when we define a variable or change a variable, it's without equal sign. The way I taught you to do it, and I tested you on this, that when we use append, we don't use equal sign. It's subtle, it's weird. The reason for it doesn't become clear until you've been coding for a while, so it's one of those things you have to memorize. This is, again, one of those gotchas that you can struggle with for a while. One of the hints that you learn ends up being none. But again, that doesn't really become a hint until you've been doing this for a while. This is one of those things that you can just like bang your head against the wall. Why am I showing you? Partly to prepare you a little bit for the awfulness, but in general to show you that the code is very specific. It's very persnickety. It really needs you to tell it exactly the right thing, and it's sensitive to small errors. When I run this, we should go back all the way to getting those 6 inputs we liked. And here we are. In the process of fixing all those errors, we found some wild stuff. We had so many errors in there that some errors were actually canceling out other errors and giving us the output we wanted. We had every kind of error. We had low-level syntax errors where I literally had typos and mistyped stuff and had too many commas or not enough commas or not enough apostrophes or too many apostrophes. And we also had logical errors where I hadn't properly thought entirely through the entire problem. And using print statements and going back and looking again and again and again at my code helped me learn my problem, essentially. I was able to learn while debugging what I really wanted. I was able to get more insight into the issue. We saw that just because your code runs doesn't mean it's giving the right answer. Just because your code gives the right answer doesn't mean it's right or logical. Remember, because Score's Skocker was canceling out that other error of none. So all these things are possible and can happen. I've given you several strategies, but those aren't going to change the fact that as you do this, as you learn to code, there are going to be times where you spend hours banging your head against the screen. It's times like that it's really, really good to have that friend who knows what they're doing, because someone who's been doing this long enough can just look at your code and immediately see what took you 4 hours to find. So it's really good to have that friend as a last resort. It's great to have strategies for debugging as much as you can, getting more and more self-sufficient over time. But for some things, don't spend more than half an hour. If you have that friend, you'll annoy that friend if you don't give it a good 10 minutes to try to solve it yourself. But after that 5-10 minutes, if you're really stuck or you just don't know what you're doing, when I get really stuck, I weirdly start to fall asleep. So my sign that I should ask others for help, and I still ask for help all the time, is I'm starting to fall asleep. So you learn yourself, you learn what you need, you learn your own triggers, your own kind of roadblocks. You'll learn that feeling that, okay, I've given it a good try, but I'm really stuck. I have no idea what to do. That's when you ask. In the class, you can ask a teacher, but on your own, in a self-sufficient world, you're putting things together, you have other people you can rely on. Community ends up being an important part of learning all of this. So we learned a bunch of debugging strategies, how to interpret errors, the different kinds of errors, the kinds of things that can go wrong, and what it looks like to write code from scratch and sort of get it to a point from being like a skeleton of what I want to actually doing what I want and nothing more than that. I hope you got something out of this. Hopefully it demystifies things a little bit. It's sort of a long, it was kind of a long explainer because there are lots of errors in there. You don't have to, more important than understanding every little thing I did. I'm not going to test you on this code straight up. More important than understanding everything I did is understanding the strategy I was following every time I encountered an error. There are lots of different errors, so there are lots of different strategies, but you saw a pretty good sampling of the things people do. Big one's going to be that print statement. Once again, I hope you got something out of this. Thank you very much, and good luck.